the next topic is so important because so many people have been led astray, confused by misinterpretations. Let's show you an example of what I mean. Now, let's look at some common interpretation errors. All the various interpretations can't be right. My assumption is they tried to see how those chapters could be in progress, and they searched far back to see what fit. For me, having already made the basic connections, it didn't take long to see where they went wrong. Let's see what you think. Here's the first 3 verses of Daniel chapter 11. Now, a common interpretation you can find easily out on the web about Daniel chapters 11 verses 2 and 3. The first king in their interpretation is Cambius from 530 BC to 522 BC. The second is Pseudo-Certus from 522 BC. And the third is Darius I, Hystippus, 522 BC to 486 BC. The fourth is Ursus or Ahasuerus, as he is referred to in Esther, from 486 to 465 BC. Many of the interpretations then skip about 90 years and claim the mighty king in verse 3 is referencing King Alexander the Great when Alexander had attacked and conquered Persia about 330 BC. A 90-year skip. Really? Again, the fourth king, that's Ursus or Ahasuerus, as he is referred to in Esther, he was from 486 to 465 BC. Now they skip all the way over to 330 BC. They skip 90 years. So do you see this gap here in verse 2 and 3? Between 2 and 3, they skip all those kings in between there. And then they go down to this war that Alexander has with this Darius III in 330 BC. It's talking about hop, skipping, and jumping. That's what they're doing here. Here's the first 3 verses of Daniel chapter 11. But look at this over here in the blue box on the right. Verse 2 talks of kings in Persia. There's no indication that the mighty king in verse 3 is not the fourth rich and powerful king in verse 2. It makes sense that the mighty king in verse 3 is the rich and powerful fourth king from the Persia area referenced in verse 2. Next common interpretation of verses 3 and 4. Let's go ahead and read verses 3 and 4. And a mighty king shall stand up that shall rule with great dominion and do according to his will. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken and shall be divided towards the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those. What actually happened after Alexander died? His kingdom was not broken. The kingdom was not divided. His posterity still ruled, and his dominion area stayed the same. His posterity ruled, 2 at the same time, his son and his half-brother, Herodias, Alexander's half-brother, who went by the name Philip III, and Alexander's son, Alexander IV, who was born months after Alexander's the great death, became the kings. Under the kings, Philip III and Alexander IV, Perdiccas, the leading cavalry commander under Alexander the Great, became regent of the entire empire, the entire kingdom. That kingdom did not split. A regent is a person appointed to administer a country because the monarch is a minor or is absent or incapacitated. Under the kings and Perdiccas, the regent, about 24 satraps, governors, were appointed. That sounds like an organized kingdom. The information above does not match the description of Daniel chapter 11, verse 4, of being broken and divided. Let's read verse 4. And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided towards the four winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others besides those. And what actually happened when he died? His half-brother and his son that was just born a few months later, they became kings. The red is the different territories of the governors. Now, on the right are a few points showing after the death of Alexander the Great, from the time of the two kings, King Philip and Alexander IV, about 323 BC to about 316 BC, when Alexander IV was recognized as the sole king with a regent. Philip died in 316 BC. So together, Alex IV was king for about 7 years. Alexander the Great Kingdom went to his posterity. Look at these different points over there. The information does not match the description of Daniel chapter 4 being broken and divided. As you saw, there are holes in their interpretations of verse 4. His kingdom went to his posterity and did not immediately split. Now look at a common interpretation of verse 6. Let's read verses 5 and 6. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion, and his dominion shall be a great dominion. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times. The king's daughter of the south, and those that brought her, and he that begat her, her father the king, are not heard of again. It seems that they were killed. Some claim the kings referenced in Daniel chapter 11, verses 5 and 6, are King Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, from 285 to 246 BC, and King Antiochus II, Theos, from 261 to 246 BC. I put their claim in the category of slicing, dicing, cherry-picking, stuffing scriptures and historic events, and here's why. Look at the king of the south. So between the end of verse 4 and the beginning of verse 5, there is no indication of skipping kings and about 40 years. One of the kings skipped was Ptolemy I, Soter, who began ruling Egypt in 305 BC, about 18 years after the death of King Alexander the Great. Yet the interpretation by some skipped this king and focus on his son. So look at verse 5, 4 and 5. And when he shall stand up, that's the fourth king, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided towards the four winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled. For his kingdom shall be plucked up even for others besides those. Verse 5. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion, and his dominion shall be a great dominion. So one of his princes, that's the king of the north. So they're adding one other king to the kingdom of the south between verses 4 and 5. It's not there, guys. I'm not seeing it. So let's talk about the king of the north. They claim it was not their original king of the north, Seleucus the first, Necatar, who was not a prince to King Ptolemy the first, sort of. Instead, they think that it was his grandson, Antiochus the second, Theos. And Antiochus did marry the one they claim is the daughter of the king of the south, about 252 BC. And the king of the south was not killed or hurt, from what I know, in the wedding. So let's look at this daughter of the king of the south. They say that it was Berenice, daughter of Egypt's Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, from 285 to 246 BC, married Syria's king Antiochus II, Theos, that had lived from 261 to 246 BC. Antiochus divorced his wife to marry Berenice. Later, that divorced wife murdered Berenice, her baby son, and even Antiochus by poisoning him. Thus she brought her own son, Seleucus II, Colonicus, to the throne. Using their interpretation, the king of the north was not a prince to the king of the south. She was not the king of the north's sister. The king of the south did stand. The king of the south's army was not killed. She was not given up. They that brought her, and he, the king of the south that begat her, and he that strengthened her in these times, were not given up or killed or hurt as far as we know.